Welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 41. This tag works a little bit differently to others because we cater more for the presenter rather than the audience. It's always good to have both, but we meet at a whole heap of different times during the week, during the day, to get the best presenters from around the world so we can capture their presentations, record them, put them on YouTube, etc. It's always good to have a live audience as well. We've still got some TC25 presentations to do over the next few weeks, maybe not months, but give me some time. I can stress that out as well. And today we've got a Visit Sydney presentation as well from June when Visit Sydney was on. If you want to present, I don't care if you've spoken at a conference before or if you haven't spoken, if you've got something that's mildly Tableau related, please email me at team.datafam@gmail.com and we'll find a slot for you. But today we've got Ludo presenting how I used data visualization to understand music. I didn't see this at Visit Sydney, which is why I really want to see it. I caught like the last few minutes of it and I went, that looks really cool. But that's all I know. So Ludo, it's over to you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. And let me share my screen. I'll start by saying that I made my life a little hard by presenting this because there's a lot of switching I need to do. I have like 10 different apps open in the background and I have something special on my desk here in front of me. Does that sound weird? We'll see. All right, so I think I've shared my sound with this as well. Yep. Okay, so yeah, my presentation is named Reimagining a Language Using Data Visualization. And Chris, you were just talking about Visit Sydney, and in there, I kind of kept it a bit of a secret what this language was, but we already know now this language is music script, you could say. And what I've done is I've gone and asked lots of questions of what is music, and I created a visualization out of that, and I'm going to walk you through that journey, what I learned and what I made out of it. What I want to focus on a little bit is that I tried to learn about music at some point, just growing up at school and so on. My sisters played musical instruments, but it never really worked for me. So there's a parallel between that and what I sometimes hear when creating business dashboards, where the end users say, well, this just doesn't work for me. Can you do it another way? So I recognize that here I was on the receiving end of that user adoption, and maybe user adoption gone wrong, at least for me. So that's what I want to talk about in this presentation. So starting with the fact that I think most people on this call and who will be watching this will be creating business dashboards. I create lots of business dashboards. I work with data, but I also create tools in Tableau and using data. And I create those tools to understand things, often to experiment. So not just to understand something else, but also to understand the data, or to understand the tool Tableau. Yeah, I use it to learn about the world. So if you look at my Tableau public profile, I'll bring it up a bit later, but here's a screenshot from there. It's not as pretty, as beautiful as some people who have been on this tag before. It's a bit of a mess, and one of the reasons for that, well, it's probably also a skill, but is that all of these things that I've highlighted in here, they're all tools in one way or another. So a tool to try and do something in Tableau, try and understand something myself, try to explain something to somebody else, and so on. And to show you two tools that I've created in the past, I'm going to switch to Tableau in a second, but these are two tools that I've created. One is a color blindness test drawer in Tableau, and the other is a tool that allows you to compare the size of different cities in the world. So I need to go out of presentation mode here and switch to my Tableau workbook. There we are. All right, so the story behind this is a color blindness test drawer. I have 2 young kids, and when my son was about 3 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old, I'm not sure, he started learning about the colors, and I would ask him, what's this color? What's that color? And I would point at, I don't know, a banana, and I asked, what color is that? And he'd say, red. I was like, oh, that's not red. And something else he would get right, and then something else he'd get wrong. And so I started to doubt, is it that he's colorblind maybe? Or is it that he just knows that he should name a color and he knows the names of the colors, but he's not sure what the names are yet? And I thought, well, he can't read yet. I can't give him these numbers or something. So I need to be able to draw him something. So I created my own tool. I went into Tableau and created this color blindness test drawer. Let's ask Fee. There's going to be a little bit of echo, but what shape do you see here? Oh, this is putting someone on the spot, but
I see a Christmas tree.
A Christmas tree, or also known as a triangle. Here we see a triangle, and now this tool allows me to draw a new shape. And you're going to say, oh, this is the sun, maybe, also known as a circle. So this tool allows me to draw a shape, and it does a color blindness test, sort of that color difference for you. So that's one of the tools I created. Another tool I've created a while ago is this tool, the True Size Cities. And actually, to demonstrate this, I have to go into my browser first. So you can see my browser. This is based on an existing website, the True Size, which nowadays has lots of ads all over the place. But this is a really cool website, and I think a really good example of what data visualization can be. It's not necessarily data visualization, it's kind of in the middle. Because this website allows you to compare the size of different countries around the world. And that is actually really hard to do because of the projection, the Mercator projection, which stretches things around the poles because a circle is plotted in a rectangle. And this website allows you to, for example, say, how does a country in Europe compare to something like New Zealand? So I'm from the Netherlands, live in New Zealand. So I've used this website to say, all right, how does the Netherlands compare, if this is going to work for me, to the size of New Zealand? And you see, because I can drag it there, I can actually make a comparison. And I can see that Netherlands, I think it's about 18 million people by now, live in this small stretch of land. That's a tiny piece of the place, New Zealand, where there are only 5 million people. And because of that projection, for example, if I pick something like Congo, that looks like it's not so big, but if I drag it towards something like Greenland, you see that it's actually probably bigger than Greenland just because it's on the equator. So I saw that, I found it really cool. I thought I want to do something like that. I want to be able to compare city sizes. That's actually quite hard to do because, again, cities are not in the same place. And how are you going to do that? Because a city shape is not as well defined as a country shape. So after a bit of a think, I came up with the idea of just plotting a circle with a size over a map and doing that on 2 places of the map. I was just creating two maps side by side. And this way you can say, all right, Auckland is this big, and that same circle on Sydney looks like this. And using parameter actions, and this is a buffer calculation, you can change the size and you can change the offset of where the circles are plotted. So if I feel like now in Sydney you have to look more northwest, I can just move it around. And one little conundrum to mention there. I'll open up my profile. This is the V2, but the V1 has been on there for a while, and it's got 126,000 views, which is a lot more than any of the other things. So obviously somebody's embedded this in their website, and it's a popular website. but I don't know of any way of understanding who embedded this. Where is this embedded? So if anyone has an idea about that, I'm keen to hear about how you figure something like that out. Just two things about how I created this. One thing is that when you're in Tableau, you've got a visualization on a map. You created a map in Tableau. Obviously, it's really easy to create a map using city names, states, postcodes, and so on. But you can't get the coordinates out, really. You don't get to see the coordinates. If you look in the rows and columns, there's lat long generated, but you can't get them out. What you can do is just right-click somewhere and annotate that point. And in there, you can actually add the lat and the long. I'll just do that here. So you can get the lat and long for a random point on the map. But what you can also do is just click on the worksheet, hit Control-C, and then go to, for example, Excel, hit Control-V, and there you see hitting Control-C does allow you to copy out the lat and long from there. So I use that trick together with the next one, which is that Tableau knows where to plot all these things because it has its own internal geospatial database. If you're on a Windows machine, it's more or less there. So it's one big hyperfile with lots of tables in it, and you can use those data points in that hyperfile to plot all those points on the map, and then you can copy them out. And that's how I generated my list of cities around the world. So two little tips there. All right, back to my presentation. Yeah. So those are two tools I created, and this is my latest quest, music. So you could say I used Tableau to redefine a language after I went through a discovery of how does this thing work. And I did that by asking lots of questions. We have ChatGPT now, we have the internet now, so you can find all the information as long as you're able to ask the right questions, which obviously is a skill that people like us need to have. So I think often the best questions are the simplest ones. If you can't explain something complex to someone who has no idea, like a child, then you probably don't understand it well enough. So I asked really simple questions, and I tried to turn those answers into understanding. And as I went through that, I felt like we need a new way to speak this language. I used my third language after English and Dutch, which is data visualization. And I try to use best practices more than what music theory does, in my opinion, nowadays. And the end result is something that looks a bit like this. This is what we'll be working towards in this presentation. It's, you could call it a musical wheel, which doesn't explain everything in music, but it explains chords and scales, how they work, why they work the way they do. So let me walk you through that. So you can say we are all authors. We all speak a visual language, and we have the tools to speak that language. And it is our job to transfer information or knowledge to other people using that visual language. So in a way, you could say we are viz writers. Anyone who was at TC19 might understand that joke. And you can say language is in many things. For example, it's in signs that you see on the road. This is an image I stole from Mac Bryler, the Tableau evangelist from years ago. He used this as a bad example of visualization because this language has a context, and it's not appropriate for the context. The context is you need to choose whether you can park here now, and you don't want to be reading a lot while you're driving past the parking spot. But it can also be in other things like the Braille language, which has its own context. Obviously, it's the context where there's no visuals, and the other way around, sign language, where there's no sound involved in the language. And they all have context. They all have their own way of the type of focus that they have, the type of information that you can convey. And they all have their constraints, you could say. So in music script, the constraints that you have is the user context. So is someone playing music or learning about music? There's a technology, which at the time this was invented was just ink on paper. There was not much more than that. There's the instrument that you're working with. So ideally a language would be usable across different instruments. And often there's a bit of historical context as well. So in what I'm going to walk you through in this presentation, music was tuned in a different way at the time than it is now. And I'll show you visuals about why that is. But I think it's always a good idea to see things as languages and to try and be multilingual, because it helps you understand your own language better. As a native Dutch speaker, I've learned a lot about the Dutch language. Certain things are really hard in Dutch, which are really easy in English. So knowing English, knowing a bit of French, Spanish, German helps me understand my Dutch language better. And you can apply that same thing to, for example, SQL. By learning a bit of Python, I understand SQL better. And I understand Tableau better by learning a bit of the other guys. I can say it here, Power BI. So a forward-looking statement. I use this at Visit Sydney in the Salesforce Tower. This is the Salesforce forward-looking statement. But if you read the small print, I know nothing. I don't use this to try and learn about music. I know nothing about music. That's the whole point why I made this thing. So you might learn something, but probably not the basics about what music is. And some of this might even be wrong. I know that Chris knows quite a bit about music, so at the end he could probably tell me where I was wrong. So music theory, 3 things that you kind of need to know for this presentation. The first thing is music is written in notes. And again, we're talking about tones more than things like rhythm and so on. So in here, each note means what tone you hear. And the higher the note here is, the higher the pitch is of the note that you play. Secondly, on something like a piano, there's a bit of a focus on a piano here today, a higher note in number 1 translates to something further to the right on the piano, because to the right you go higher. And you see there are white and black keys, and those black keys in number 1 are written by adding little bits to the way you write the notes. So if the note goes up, so say you have a C and you want the note to be slightly higher, you use a sharp. And then you go from the white C to the black C sharp. Or if you want to go down, that's called a flat. You would go from the white D back to the D flat, which is actually the same as the C sharp. So those are ways in which music is written. If you make use of a sharp or a flat, but for a particular note you don't want to use it, you use that natural extra icon. But we're not going to go further in depth with that. But the white and the black keys, up, down, left, right, those are the most important things to know here. And while I was trying to learn this, I was thinking, is there sort of elitist thought in this? Is it techno speak? Is it we're making this extra hard so that we filter out those who are just clueless to say like, we have our language? And then I thought, are we doing the same thing? Are we using sort of our intellectual vanity when we talk about data, about, all this terminology that we use in dashboards and in working with databases and so on? So it is something to always keep in mind. Like, how do you translate something to meet the audience where they are at? There's no point talking to an audience in a language containing lots of these terms. And in that same way, we might be using language to our end users where we lose them really early on because the language doesn't meet them where they are in their understanding. So how do we bring that back to where they are at? But if we're talking about are we elitist, this is something that at the company I work for was made for me. They styled a Teams chat, Ludo's Union, because I tend to rant about stuff. So let's not. So what is wrong with it then? I think music script doesn't follow visual best practices. And I have a few examples of that. So let me switch to that. That's not the one. 1 second. There. Okay, so music does not follow visual best practices, if you ask me. The first one is consistency. In data visualization, we are taught to be consistent. So one thing on the left needs to mean the same thing on the right. So here, if you look at the tone ladder here, if I say a C, that's a note that's in between two lines. But if I click on that, here it's a note that's on a line. And the same goes for an F and for everything else. So that's not very consistent. Someone like me who's very new to music needs these extra colors to figure out what's what between these two. Then there's the thing of these clefs. That's something I haven't mentioned yet, but when you play, well, at least when you play the piano, your right hand plays the treble clef and your left hand, so that's the lower, the bass, plays with the bass clef. So if you go with the notes in between the lines, the space notes, as you might call them, for the treble clef, the G clef, that is F-A-C-E. But if you use the bass clef, it's something else. It's A-C-E-G. And as you see, I didn't make these things up. People need acronyms or mnemonics to remember what exactly these things are. So all cows eat grass, and then if we go for the line notes, we have good burritos don't fall apart for bass, or every good boy deserves fudge for your right hand, your treble clef. So it's made so hard that you need these mnemonics for it. Then this is the really bad one, if you ask me. Consistency again. Here we've got a C note. If you go back to that first one, this is the right hand. It's a C note, but we have a sharp in front of it. So this is a C sharp. Then here we go one note up, but we put a flat in front of it. So this is a D flat. But if you go back to my presentation, which I probably still have here, here, a C sharp and a D flat is the same key on the piano. So we've got two completely different notes here at a different place with a different icon in front of it, but they both mean the same thing. In data visualization, you would not get away with this. And in music, they have been getting away with this for hundreds of years. And that kind of leads to this thing where, again, if you plot a note on a place, in a place on the tone ladder, it might mean something else based on something that happened earlier on that you must have remembered. And obviously, that's why when you learn about music, you have to learn your scales and so on. But I wasn't there yet, and this really was a blocker for me for understanding how things work. So back to the PowerPoint to go over my journey. Ooh, just 1 second. All right, so the key thing for me, why did this not work for me? Because everyone comes from a place from not knowing something and they go to a place of learning it. Why didn't it work for me? Partly because of my personality, which does not deal well with this. There's a part where I was a non-technical user and something was taught, and then there's somewhere in the middle is like, well, that thing just follow the instructions. And I would ask why, and the instructor would be like, well, this is just how we've always done it. This is just how it is. But why? Well, just follow the instructions. And for someone curious like me, that just doesn't work. I want to know why, or else it won't stick. So I went into ChatGPT and I asked those really simple questions. First of all, what is a note? So why is an A an A? Why is a C a C? Why are some piano keys white and some others black? What are chords and what are scales? How do they work? How is music in a key? And then some extra questions. Why does Arab music sound so distinct, or any non-Western music really? Why do they sound so different from European music? And similar question, coming from New Zealand, I've heard lots of Maori harmonies, and they also sound very specific. You can hear straight away that this something is a Maori harmony. Why is that? How is it that you can hear that straight away? So I went and tried to answer those questions. I asked lots of questions of ChatGPT, and I fell off my chair a couple of times when I got some of these answers back, where I was like, really, is this really how things are? I then turned those insights into a dynamic visualization. And I must say, I now understand music theory a little bit better. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at all, hence the slide earlier on. But I did share some of this with people who have played music for a long time. And they often said, I didn't even know this. So they were taught to just follow the instructions. They did that, but they never went back to the why question. They never really understood why. And I would think that may have gotten in their way of taking their music journey further. So question 1, what is a note? A note is a frequency, and it's kind of a fixed frequency. So what's happened is at some point, somebody said, all right, the A4, so the fourth time you get an A note on a piano, that is 440 hertz. There are musicians who say it should be 432. That's a slightly different sound, but it's a fixed frequency. And then when you go up an octave, so to the next A, you get to A5. And when you, an octave means you're following all the white keys. And I should be able to demonstrate that. Yeah, exactly. I have a piano in front of me that's connected to my keyboard. That's why everyone here is muted. So here this works. Can you hear me? All right, so this is a C. That's a dead key. Sorry. Oh, there we are. All right, so those were all the white keys, and between the first and the last, I went from C to C. So I went up an octave, 8 keys. But I used 8 keys, but there are more than 8 keys in there. Because if you look at it, you start at 0. I started at this 0, that's a C, and I ended at 0 there. But it was really the 12th key because I skipped the black ones. So what's going on there? So what is a note really? Each octave, you double the frequency. And from A4 to A5, you don't go up 8, but you go up 12 keys. And what's interesting there is that between each note, between each key, whether they are black or white, you go up the exact same amount, as in you multiply by 1.05. So you go up 6% more or less each time. And if you do that 12 times, you end up with duplication. Hence the 12th root of 2. If you have 2 to the power of 12, you have doubled. And that means that is equal temperament. So that means that every note, the space in between each note is the same, but it also means that there's no difference between white and black keys. So what's a note really? It's cyclical. It's 12 steps, and we have the same interval between each step. And that took me some thinking about what this rings a bell. I recognize this from something. Music is a clock. Music does the same thing as a clock. 12 points. If you go around the clock, you're again back at 12 o'clock. And you go around again. Every hour takes the same amount of time. So back to Tableau then. All right. So about those frequencies, what would that look like in a data visualization? Here, if I go from A to A, we start at 440 hertz, and then the next A is 880 hertz. And it's not super easy to see, but it's not a straight line. It's sort of exponential because we keep multiplying by 1.595 each time. But as you see, if I do the percent change window calculation, it's exactly the same percent change between black and white keys. So why do we have black and white keys if they are exactly the same? You could say on a piano, you could have only white keys. And it really is mainly for pattern recognition. And the easy thing is that all the white keys, that's the C major scale. And there is some historical context there about how before equal temperament, so the exact same space between each note was used, the black keys and the white keys were actually different. But over time, Western music adopted equal temperament, and now that's no longer the case. So you could say this is how we've always done it, and we just keep things that way. And who doesn't recognize that? Nobody ever said that, did they? So over to question 5, and I actually have an example. I hope you can hear this. This is what I mean with Arab music. I hope you could hear that. That was absolutely not Western music, right? Straight away, you know that is non-Western music, and probably you could hear that it's Arab music. And why is that? It is because the Arabs they've always been good at maths, and what they did with music when they explored music is they didn't divide an octave in 12 notes. They divided the 24 notes. So they go up 2.93% instead of that almost 6% that we in Western music do. And what they then did is they created these, I don't even know how to pronounce this, makam, where they have a pattern of which ones do you skip and which ones do you use. So you see that this is makam rast, and that was what I was playing. It was also in makam rast. It's like a scale. You go from A to A sharp plus, which is plus 9%, but then to C plus. So the in between the C and the C sharp is plus 12%, and then 9 and 12. So you see that pattern here. So it's a different way of approaching it, and that's why it sounds very different to Western music, because they're just these intervals between tones that we are not used to hearing. So that was another question answered for me. Then back to the music being a clock. It's supposed to be a C. So what I recognize is that you could see music as a clock, where you start at the C and then you go around like you would at a clock. And at the end, you would end up at C, you would end up at 12 again. And I can turn that into notes where I say, well, we start at C, then there's a C sharp, D, D sharp, and so on. And a piano follows a certain pattern of what are the neighbors of a key. Are they both white or black, and so on. And then because every tone, the difference between every tone is the same, you can kind of, you can switch it around. So it doesn't matter whether you have the C at the top or something like an E at the top. Oh yeah, I have to go to the next slide for that. What happens with chords and scales is that you're following a pattern of what are you using, what are you skipping. So when you use a natural minor C scale, you skip, this is a minor, let me use a major, major. If you use a C major scale, you see I start with C and I skip all those sharps. Some of those will be called flat. I don't fully understand that yet, but you skip all the black keys basically, and you have only the white keys in here. But as you already saw, if I use a minor scale, then I will start including some of those black keys. So moving on with the clock, then you could say if music is a clock, then a chord and a scale is a pattern of what do you use, what do you skip. So in that thinking, you could say that a major chord means you start with the C with your 12, and then you go to your E, which is the 4, and then to the G, which is the 7. So you could say a major chord is 20 past 7. Or, yeah. And then if I want to see a minor chord, it's almost the same thing, but it's a quarter past 7. And I'm now using C as the bass note. So I go C, D sharp, G, but I can just turn that around and say, well, I have to, further on, I can put the main key at the top. But the difference, that the interval between the keys that you use and skip will remain the same. So from there, what I did is I created these chord wheels because a clock is a bit hard to read, but I think we could agree that we're so used to reading a clock that you should be okay to recognize this as sort of 20 past 7, and this is a quarter past 7, and this is 20 past 8. So we're kind of used to seeing things that way. So that's a chord, and a scale is the whole thing, like I just played, where you play all the white keys for a C major scale. And I'll skip to the sort of final slide here, where I'm trying to convert that to something where I combine the piano, because I must say, even though I created this thing and it helps me, I can't actually read it and play a piano with it. And I understand it takes up, it's like a pie chart. It takes up way too much space, obviously, but it helps me understand things. It helps me bridge a gap in my understanding. So here, a minor C chord is C, then the black D sharp, and then G. And let me play that. So them together, they sound a bit sad. Now, if I go over my little piano here and I say I want a major chord, like that, it's C, E, G. So that sounds a lot happier. And what I was referring to earlier is that I now have the C at the top, but if I want to place the E at the top, the bass note at the top, that's what I was referring to before. The shape is still the same. It's still a major chord, but now we have E as 12 o'clock. So it's E, G sharp, B. And there's my handy way of being able to read that. So that. It still sounds as happy, but now it's a major E chord, and so on. There are different kinds of chords. So there are chords like a major 7 that has 4 different keys. Let me just make it a C major 7, and then I'll stop playing the piano, making a fool of myself. So that's that one. So that's a major 7 chord. And again, the shape of the chord is the same for every note. So if I have a F sharp major 7, the shape didn't change. The keys changed, but the shape doesn't change. Then one last part of theory is something that I realized as I was going through this, which is, I'll go back to a major chord here, that if things are a circle, then 12, 4, and 7, you're hitting the same keys as when you say 4, 7, 12, or 7, 12, 4. You've just gone around the clock. It's not 4 p.m., it's 4 a.m. now, but it's still 4 o'clock, right? So that's what in music is called inversion. So now it's a C chord, and we use the root position as well. That is called. But if I say I want to use an inversion, I start at E, and you say I get E, G, C. So I go. my piano is not great. But that's still a C chord, but it sounds a little bit different. And actually, my keyboard stops there. So if I go one up, I need to go to my lower thing. But I can also go G, C, E. So that is G. I think I'm wrong there. That is still a C chord, but it's C inversion. We've gone around the clock in this way. And I thought that might be the reason why Maori harmonies sound different. And let me play you a little bit of Maori harmonies. I think some of the people in this call might recognize this great song from the 80s. Such a great song. It's called Poie by the Patea Maori Club. Everyone check it out. But you might have heard that those those harmonies are very distinct, are very specific. And I thought that these inversions explain why they're different, that Maori harmonies make use of lots of these inversions. And then it turned out that that's nonsense. It's not true. It's not what they do. They do different things. I still don't know exactly what they do, but that brings us back to my earlier statement. So back into PowerPoint. Backward looking statement. I still know nothing, and that's okay. I still don't really understand music, but I have now kind of bridged the gap a little bit between where I was as somebody who knew absolutely nothing to someone who's ready to start using the theory as it is. So there was a gap that needed bridging, and hopefully for some of you listening, that gap is slightly bridged as well. I'm curious what someone like Chris, who knows about music, thinks about this. And then I'd gone really far on this journey, and I thought, surely somebody has created something like this. You're not going to tell me that nobody ever did this. And then I never found someone. And then I did one last search, and then Wikipedia had it, obviously. So I'm still working on my search game. But I would say between this bland thing on Wikipedia and my color wheel, it's hopefully a little bit clearer. And some of my music friends said, but this is the circle of fifths, isn't it? And I looked at the circle of fifths, and I felt like the confused math lady over here. I was like, this is definitely not the same as what I did, because we're not saying A, B, C, D in here. I'm sure it's useful, but this is way, way ahead of me. I don't understand this at all. And that's fine. There's a journey, and I've just started that journey. Now, I'm not sure if we have time for technical stuff, but I can just mention at least that some of the things I needed to do here. First of all, I created my own data set, just a couple of Excels, but to come up with the information that I needed to make this thing work. So I made a tone dimension table. I made a circle. So what you see over there, these are all sort of polygon points on a polygon to create a circle with a number of wedges. The piano that you saw is also made up of polygons. So you can just draw in Tableau with data points where you go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you connect them, and then you have a shape. And I then sort of mapped that. I related the dim tone to scale. So I said a scale is number 0, 4, and 7. That is a chord. That's the major chord. So there's a bit of relationships going on there. Then I'll actually go back to the thing one just for a second. The control visibility using value, the dynamic zone visibility. What I did, and I'd never done or seen that before, is this little piano key here works on a hover action. So by hovering over the button, you get this dynamic zone visibility to switch to true. So we see this thing. And then by hovering over any of the graphs here, we switch that back to false. So I thought it was quite a neat way of interacting with your GUI, your interface. So that makes use of dynamic zone visibility together with a parameter action. And then finally, the wheel itself is made up of lots of layers of polygons. So as you can see here, the black and white parts, the colored parts, the shapes that are going over that, some of the labels, and so on. So those are the things that I used. And let me know if you want further details of what that looks like technically in Tableau. 1, 2, and 3. And so in conclusion, I would say it's a really good idea to make tools, make them for yourself, make them for other people. I think Tableau and data are not just for data visualization, they're really for understanding the world. So use it to make tools, meet end users where they are. I think that's a really important one that I could really take on board here, because I was now on the receiving end of not being met. And that's a really good exercise for in case you often hear complaints. And yeah, it takes some work to understand that perspective of that end user. And using this phase adoption, really what's happening here is I made something extra simple, you could say, for myself to bridge the gap between where I want to be and where I'm at now. And in a business scenario, what you can do here is use this for phase adoption, where you say, we're going to first create something that doesn't give you all the information that you may need, but we'll give you something that at least we're all agreed on that you understand. And then 3 months down the line, we'll give you the next step of where you should be, because by that time, you've become a little bit more literate in understanding data visualization, understanding data. And obviously, never stop learning in this day and age. You're not done learning when you come out of university. You're only getting started. Keep learning, keep making tools. That's me. That's me on LinkedIn and Tableau Public. And thank you for your time. I think I have to stop sharing so that everyone can unmute. But no, thank you very much.
Any questions?
Not so much of a question, but I just want to say, this is the second time I've seen this, and it really kind of, I love it. When I remember doing music at school, I couldn't play a note, but the maths of it really appeals. And so this kind of, really kind of scratches an itch for that, and got more out of it the second time. So yeah, thank you again for doing that, Ludo.
I said, wow, no, that's awesome to hear that you saw new things. I don't know if I said new things, but.
My biggest question probably is, why did you do that? Is it because you wanted to learn, or you were trying to help your kids learn?
That is actually a very good question. No, I'm not actually, I've not yet used this to teach my kids, but I do always have that in the back of my mind. I have sort of played around with creating writing, reading, and math sort of games in Tableau to teach them about that stuff. Probably I don't feel comfortable helping my kids learn about music because, well, I don't know about music. But it's definitely a good idea. For me, it was really that we have a piano at home. My wife plays piano, and it's sort of in next to the doorway from the room to the hallway. And every now and then I would hit a few keys, and every time I was like, oh, surely this must be a chord. And then I was like, bah. And all this time I was like, how can this be so hard? Why this is a chord? Why is this not a chord then? I'm using black keys here, I'm using black keys there. What's the problem? So I love listening to music, and I'm fascinated by the feelings that music can give you. And so I with the chat GPTs of the world, and actually quite a bit of Wikipedia as well, I thought, all right, that's it. I need to know now. And so I did.
Because there's parts of that where I sort of go, oh, if you just knew this piece, that would actually explain a lot to you. But yeah, I can catch up on that later. And the reason I asked is because I did the same thing with my kids. When they get up to a certain age and they're learning music at school, well, can I help them? Have I got, I did every year in high school I did music, so I came out with a lot of practice. But the same as what you said, I'd always learn how to play treble clef So when I was trying to teach my kids, I thought, I'll teach them, I'll learn bass clef to teach them, to show them how hard it is to do this sort of thing. Not realizing that I thought, what's a good instrument to learn bass clef on? Bass guitar. And bass guitarists don't read staff music. So I sort of snookered myself on that as well. And went, oh, okay. Went down another different track again. But it's music, a lot of different tracks.
Yeah, and there are plenty of things that I really don't understand yet. For example, how does the bass and the left and the right hand on the piano, how do they come together? If I play a C on bass, do I play a C there, or do I kind of play the same notes that's in between these two lines? I haven't gone there, and we don't need to answer that here. It's really a first step for me, and I now have something to start building on top of, some sort of foundation. But no, I'll keep that in mind. It's a good idea. And
if I remember it properly, because you sort of touched on this as well, when you look at the treble clef and you've got the 5 notes on the staff, and the middle C is the one below that. But then if you imagine a line that you don't see, and then the bass clef is below that 5 lines on the staff, that's how it swaps over. Which is why, as you were saying, it's like sometimes it's on a line, but then the same note, a scale above, is in the gap. And it's sort of, when you're learning that, it's always just this like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It either makes sense, or you just get to the point where you go, it doesn't need to make sense. That's how it works. So,
yeah. I would say like the math, sure, that's how it works. The writing, definitely a person was involved with that. And they did not get a high grade on my, if I was the DataViz teacher on that course.
No, but your angle on that was really cool, because you just took it's not the traditional approach, but it actually worked really well, when you've got the clock and you've got all that stuff as well. So, it was good.
I don't suppose you saw there was a Viz of the Day end of last week, I think, that was kind of related to this, that I think you'll find really interesting. Well,
was that the one about the tonnets?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had seen something about the tonnets on this journey as well, and there was a lot of confused math lady in my head again when I saw that. It was like, sure, if you're a few steps ahead of me in your understanding, then I'm sure this is really useful. Just like the circle of fifths, and actually, the owner of this piano, Dylan, he explained something about it to me, like how you use it, and I was like, yeah, I can imagine that being really, really useful. But it's not where I am right now. So to me, it's a few steps too far, and I felt the same about the tonnets. Whereas like it looks like a magical thing, but for magicians, not for lowly.
I just, again, as a mathematician, I just love the idea of bringing geometry in there as well as a whole other thing to kind of relate, music.
Yeah, and maths. I think from this, I learned as well that there are nowadays, we have different tools at our disposal, like websites and apps and so on, where they do actually use better visualization principles than they did back in the day. You can now create something where you use different angles, like color, shapes, geometry, whatever. And I think when you're in data visualization, there's a lot to learn from visualization that's not data visualization. It can be language, it can be drawing, it can be street signs or whatever. It's all sort of a form of language, a form of communication, and that too, I'm seeing a lot of maths being explained in a more visual geometry type of way, and it clicks better for me this way. So learning has become better probably, and I'd love if I could be a tiny little part of that.
There's a lot of maths in music though, obviously, as you've done with that as well. Absolutely. And then when you go to learn the guitar, it's just exactly the same thing, mapped completely differently. And then bass guitar, everyone goes, oh, a guitar and a bass guitar are the same thing. No, they're completely different instruments. Played a completely different way. They just look the same, which is hard.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I want to know that, because it makes you feel like, oh, it's so unreachable, and which is why probably people say, like, let's just skip a lot of the why. Let's first go to being able to do something, and we'll get to the why at some point. So maybe this whole presentation is about I should change my personality because this is in the way, but it's a bit of both, probably. That it's, you often hear people say, like, if you want to learn the guitar, just start playing Beatles songs, because they are often very simple. They follow recognizable patterns, and you feel like you can do something, and that will be a good feedback loop for yourself to keep playing. And all of that will go back one way or another to the work that we do and the way that we communicate with end users, stakeholders, and so on.
I'm worried I'm going to call it the wrong thing, but I think it's the Suzuki method. And if I've said that wrong, then I'm really wrong. But I think it is the Suzuki method, where it's just like, don't teach people how to read music, just teach people how to play it on piano. So the same thing with Beatles music is learn a few chords, and then you can suddenly learn 100 songs. Or you can suddenly play 100 songs, because it's just that simple. Once you get the progression down, suddenly a whole heap of theory just evaporates. You don't need to know it, but you can still play really well.
Yeah, and then the theory is like, well, if you need it, you can always go back to it. But it makes sense. It's often how I try to demo things, like demo Tableau to a new crowd. I first let them do the whole thing, and then I explain it, because I can then say, remember this? Oh, here's a really complex thing, but remember how we did that and that during the demo? That's what we're doing here. And all of a sudden it becomes way more tangible.
Yeah.
And I
you sort of
suppose
explain the mechanics afterwards.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I've been following along with some of Andy Kriebel's work at the moment, and doing some sessions where you watch him build visualizations at the same time, and it's so fascinating, the things that I'm learning, just little tiny things that are like, you've just saved me 2 clicks out of 5, so 40% of the clicks. And when you're doing that over and over and over and over again, first of all, it's like way better for RSI, and not having to do that same click and that same movement if you're creating lots of similar things. But it's really interesting to pick up his tips and tricks. And I've found it fascinating today, Ludo, watching the way that you learn, and understanding how you're breaking it down in a way that I couldn't fathom to do something so, intricate and similar. But it's fascinating to see that's how you unlock your learning, and it's really cool.
And it works, right?
And I think, it is about, I tend to, like, I've done lots of Tableau training as well, and in there I call it, this works better in Dutch, but I call it the maths teacher disorder or problem, where what I've had, at least in school, is that learning math, I wasn't great at math, and one of the reasons was that the teacher understood the concepts too well. And the teacher could not go back to what you see, what you read when you don't understand this concept yet. So being able to go back to the blue mind, the not knowing something, is actually really hard. But you need to do that if you want to explain something to a 5-year-old, and that goes back to if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you probably don't understand it well enough, or to your parents or whatever. I try to always keep that in mind as well.
I also find that sometimes it's harder to teach. Sometimes we do things so intuitively that then having to think about what I'm trying to explain to someone without actually doing it. So I'm not classically Tableau trained. My Tableau training has come from doing community fun things on the side, but that's really more about motivating large groups of people so that they go and do it and learn lots more, rather than me being so hands-on on the tools. But that's changed a lot recently over the last year, where I've been more on the tool. So I know that I do find it difficult at times to explain what I've done, because it's just like, oh, I do it so naturally without even thinking about it. And what's been interesting in watching Andy break things down is he doesn't have a set of instructions that he's following, but he does explain things as he's going through it. And it's just fascinating to see the pace at which that occurs and the way he goes about it as well. He's a very gifted coach. I wish I could be as talented in that space.
Yeah, the video, the presentation is the explanation, is the instruction.
Yeah.
And the challenge as well is teaching kids something. So teaching kids music and teaching adults music is two completely different things, because your approach can be different as well. Like teaching adults Tableau or SQL or Python is not the same approach as if you were teaching a kid exactly the same thing, because their brains work differently. The approach has got to be different.
But then explaining it in sort of a multilingual way will help you understand it as well.
For sure, yes.
So yeah, definitely something I recommend doing every now and then.
Easy. Any more questions?
No question for me, but thank you, Ludo, for the presentation. It's great. It is the first time I see how you use Tableau and then the music for that. It is the first time I see that. I'm not so good at music, but a year ago we were planning to learn guitar. Then I just give up, after like 2 weeks. That how I'm going to reach all the notes, C sharp here and there. Oh my god.
Yeah, I got the question in Sydney at Visit as well. Like, when are you going to do the guitar version of this?
Yeah. Oh my god.
But it's kind of the same thing. And going through this, it's like, well, on the guitar you don't have black and white strings. It's like it's one fret every time. So again, multilingual, different angles to the same thing can be useful. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think Ludo covered it anyway, but there's all these contact details: Tableau Public, X, LinkedIn, etc. And for those people who still want to hang around, we haven't done this yet. I know we're a little bit over time. That's fine. You can watch the recording if you need to go. But obviously, fast five. So quick questions, quick answers. There's no right or wrong. It's just personal preference. Pass if you want to, but they're meant to be lighthearted and fun. I'm not trying to corner anyone on anything in particular. That's just whatever you think is the right answer. That's the right answer.
Let's go.
So question 1, what's the first thing you do when you open Tableau? What's the first thing you do when you open Tableau?
First thing you do.
I typically click the Tableau icon in the top left corner to open an existing workbook. Open a workbook that I've recently been working on. That's typically where I'd go.
Yep, cool.
Yeah.
And number 2, when designing a dashboard, do you start with the data or with the layout?
I'll start with the requirements.
Yep.
A or B, C, yeah.
That's fine. And number 3, what color palette do you find yourself using most often?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. The default one is the short answer. Let's put it that way. I don't switch around too much, but I do a lot of client work, and then I'll use or I'll prompt them to create, or I'll create one for them, create a customer color palette, and then use that. But I must say that sometimes that can get in the way, because I've worked with customers where they had a very specific set of colors, but they were not very distinct or different. And everything had to be in those colors. And I was like, now your branding is really in the way of your understanding. Hey, that rhymes. Yes, in a case like that, I try to push back against using that, saying, hey, don't you know where you work? But
Yep.
yes. Oh, and this is the rainbow circle or something. It's an existing color palette that I used for this one, and I quite like it. It's very joyful.
Yep, definitely. And number 4, do you like minimalist dashboards or detailed ones with lots of information?
Another one of those. For myself, I tend to put more information and more interaction into dashboards, but I know that doesn't work for every user. I get the, hey, you're not meeting me where I'm at response if I add too much interaction, or like a C-level exec is not going to play around with filters and parameters. So I know that I have to stop myself from doing that, where I'm like, you could get so much more insight out of this, but like I said, I have to start with the requirements. Why would someone like that do all that clicking? They don't want to be doing that. So yeah, situational, but I love it if you can get a lot of insight out of a visualization. So a lot of interaction, a lot of ability to deep dive, but knowing that it's not for everyone.
Yep, cool. And the last one, I think, how do you feel about using filters directly on the dashboard?
Not sure how to interpret the question, but I would say I typically have some filters on a dashboard. I'm not sure if you mean drop-down filters or action filters, but I tend to use them and sort of have to stop myself from using them if the situation is not right for it. And obviously you can hide them and so on, but even though it feels like a really good idea, I haven't been in too many situations where we ended up really hiding filters behind a hide button or a dynamic zone visibility type of situation. So positive.
Yep. and I think I said that at the start anyway, but I think I missed out a little bit. All these questions are always different. I know that you've never seen the questions before. I created them out of ChatGPT about an hour ago. So there's a lot of questions I dump and don't use. But, it's just random questions. So we can get your feelings on things. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's easy.
No,
but thank you for that.
Not bad, Chat.
Yeah. I'm getting my prompt better these days. So I'm actually getting some better quality questions coming in.
Yeah.
Doesn't get it right all the time. The next TUG meeting is in a day and a half from basically right now. So Anne's going over a reflection of her Tableau Next Hackathon award-winning entry. And obviously those times depends on where you are in the world. It's all the same meeting. Join on the QR code, go back to the user group website and register through there. But it's just her feelings and a walkthrough of what she did with Tableau, or how she used Tableau Next, what she did with her Tableau Next Hackathon entry that she won the prize with as well. So again, Friday morning if you're in Australia, Thursday night depending on where you are in the rest of the world. And this recording and a whole heap of other recordings are on YouTube at Team DataFam. There's a whole heap of different things there. There's been a few tugs recently that have started up. So there's the brand new Data Plus Women US West Coast. There was the Kenya one the other day. I think Tim was here earlier. A whole heap of stuff on that channel. You either watch it on YouTube or you can listen to it on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And if you want to present or if you've got any questions, just email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. IronViz is on at the moment, so go and look about what IronViz is about. The theme this year is food and drink. So hurry up and get some food and drink entries if you want to go to San Diego and compete on stage, if you're lucky enough to do that. But thank you again, Ludo, for your time today. That was great. The one more thing we just covered, so that shouldn't be there. But it was good to see that. As I said, I miss it and visit. I saw the last 5 minutes when we were in Sydney and just sort of went, hang on, you're doing some music thing that I should have actually probably seen rather than the other session I was at. But it was really great to cover that as well. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I think that's the last slide because, yes, that is the last slide. Any other questions from anyone else or any comments before we go? Okay. No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for attending. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Ludo.
Okay.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
Thank you. Okay, bye.